Welcome, lords and ladies, back to the realm. I am your humble host, the Goat King. It has come to my attention that many of us in the Pathfinder community have focused on the wrong things when trying to bring new people into the game. So, for today's topic, let's talk about the little people, all the small ancestries you can play in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. As always, this can all be found online at Archives of Nethys for free. Let's start with the most common ancestries, those from the Core Rulebook and Advanced Player's Guide. In the Core Rulebook, we're starting with Gnomes. The Gnomes come from the First World, and because of that, when on the material plane, they need to constantly seek out novel experiences in order to avoid the bleaching, a unfortunate condition that affects gnomes who fail to seek out new experiences. Of course, gnomes come in many varieties. We have the color-changing, almost chameleon-like gnomes. And we have gnomes with innate magic, both those who derive their magic from the First World, and those who have a wellspring of internal power. And quite fitting with gnomes' natural explorative tendencies, we have sensate gnomes. These spend so much time and energy and focus on the world around them that they have developed a very keen sense of smell. There are even gnomes who hail from groups who spend more time underground, umbral gnomes, if you will, with eyes well adapted to the dark. And from the Lost Omens character guide, we also get vivacious gnomes who are full of life. Our next subject are goblins, energetic, fire-loving, mildly chaotic, and always resourceful. And I don't say fire-loving for no reason. Many of them have a natural resistance to fire because of their many experimentations. Goblins can also have oral fixations, be them capable of eating even the most unpleasant of meals, or having razor-sharp teeth useful for self-defense. And, for some reason, there are blue goblins. Blue goblins with fur. Blue goblins with fur who spend much of their time in cold environments. And being a small goblin doesn't necessarily make you vulnerable, as many goblins take on a certain unbreakability, an untouchable resilience. From the Lost Omens character guide, we have goblins with tails. And not just that, but also goblins so adapted to forest environments that they move through them with ease. Moving on to Halflings, the optimists at heart. Many innately blessed with luck. There are gutsy Halflings who are known for being strong leaders. And there are the more laid-back Halflings, who know exactly how to take a rest. Many Halflings are nomadic and display a great skill with learning languages. And they're Halflings suited for dark or forested environments. And from the Lost Omens character guide, we also have gnomes who are always on the lookout for danger. And moving on to the Advanced Player's Guide, we get to Kobolds. These scrappy and resourceful people worship dragons, in part because they are almost draconic themselves. In fact, many of them take on even more draconic traits than their fellows, either having scales like a dragon with some small resistance to certain types of damage, to having a pinch of innate magic to themselves, even having sharp teeth like a dragon. But not every kobold is so close to their draconic exemplars. Many take their adaptations from their environment, often being cave environments. Many are strong climbers, and others are often very good at squeezing through tight spaces. There are even kobolds who hail from tunnels that are often flooded with water. These kobolds tend to be very good swimmers. And then things start to get crazy, as there is one group of kobolds that have venom in their tails. Moving away from the reptilian peoples, we have the Ratfolk. These are a very family-oriented people who are quite at home in highly populated environments. They're very smart, and they do tend to be hoarders. Some have very sharp eyesight, others have a very keen sense of smell. Many can outpace foes when running on all fours. And because Ratfolk will often live in whatever environment they can find to fit their large families, many are quite well adapted to living in sewer environments. Not all Ratfolk are at home in the warmer spaces, some do prefer colder areas. those ones tend to have a thick coat of fur. The Lost Omens books contain many strange and unusual ancestries. From the character guide, we're given the Leshie. These are truly diverse nature spirits who have taken residence within plants. Well, not all take up residence in plants. The fungus Leshie, for instance, often take residence in, fungus in dark, cool environments. Gourd Leshies are known for their head-empty attitude as well as their literally empty heads. Leaf Leshies can frequently be found adrift on the wind, avoiding any responsibility. And Vine Leshies are unparalleled climbers, at least among Leshies. The Leshie were greatly expanded in the Lost Omens Ancestry Guide. From here we get the Cactus Leshie with their prickly attacks. The Fruit Leshie whose, honestly I'm not sure if this is cannibalism, but they can feed their allies fruits which provide healing benefits. The Lotus Leshie, these walk on water and honestly I'm not prepared to deal with the theological ramifications. The Unflappable Root Leshie who just will not be pushed around. And finally, the Seaweed Leshie because who needs air? Well, since we're talking about the Lost Omens Ancestry Guide, let's talk about the Flesh Warp. The Flesh Warp gave me a little bit of confusion because in my printed book, they say medium specifically, but on Archives of Nethys, they say medium or small. I've come to assume I simply missed the errata on that. So, if you want to play a little guy who is honestly kinda gross and maybe a little Frankensteinish, the Flesh Warp is a perfect choice. And Frankenstein is an apt reference because created flesh warps are very much Frankensteinian. The benefit to being Mr. Frankenstein's monster is, you honestly don't need to eat. The mutated flesh warp are a little different, normally coming from areas of really high, wildly magical power. Because of this, their internal organs are often not really arranged with any sense of logic. This can make them harder to kill for the people who rely on very precise strikes. Shape-wrought flesh warps have been through the ringer, so to say, so frequently that now their body resists effects that would cause them to be further warped. Technological flesh warps, often from Numeria or other places that have had a run-in with high technology, can become rather distant. The flesh warp was expanded in Lost Omens Impossible Lands. The cataphract flesh warp has a sort of Velcro that makes them better at wearing heavier armor. The discarded flesh warp were slated for disposal when they became less easy to manipulate. Surge-wise flesh warps have an innate sense of and knowledge of occult topics. Moving on from our Frankensteinian ancestry, we get the Sprite. Tiny, curious, and full to bursting with prankishness. Starting with Draxi Sprites, these pull some of their power from Fey Dragons. Typically, they have a sort of touch telepathy. Grig Sprite are almost a centaur cricket, and they tend to be pretty artsy. The Luminous Sprite function quite nearly like a glow stick, and your Malixi Sprite are almost literally social butterflies. Your Nyctera Sprite have unmatched, almost bat-like hearing. And of course we have the Pixie Sprite. These you might be more familiar with, you might have seen them more frequently, as their small size makes them easier to spot, as opposed to the other Sprite who are tiny. The Lost Omens Grand Bazaar gave us one surprise ancestry. The Poppet is an animate toy or puppet. One common way a Poppet is formed is when someone refuses to move on and attaches their ghost spirit to a doll or toy. Stuffed Poppets are perfect for ragdoll physics. Toy Poppets are specifically tiny. Wind-up Poppets are little walking music boxes who derive their energy from being wound up on a daily basis. Finally, the Wishborn Poppet come, as you might expect, from somebody making a sincere wish. Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse brings us a couple of small ancestries. Not all Knolls are monsters, especially those found in regions around the Mwangi Expanse. And while they're not innately small, one subset of them are. Ant Knolls are small in stature, sharp-eared, and honestly adorable. The Gripply can also be found in the Mwangi Expanse if you know just where to look. They often prefer to stay hidden within self-made nature preserves, which they both care for and prosper from. Gripply come in many varieties, from the archetypically frog-like snap tongues, to poison-hide Gripply who you honestly shouldn't touch, to the sticky-toe Gripply with a grip like glue, and finally, Windweb Gripply who laugh at falling damage. Rounding out the small ancestries currently available in the Lost Omens line, from Lost Omens Impossible Lands we have the Kashrishi. These small psychic rhinos evolve and adapt at a very rapid pace. Athmashi Kashrishi have a secondary set of arms used specifically for climbing. Lithosi Kashrishi are from environments where there's a lot of water and, as such, needed to be strong swimmers. Nascent Kashrishi went through most of their childhood before developing more of their Kashrishi traits. This means they get an extra ancestry feat. Trogloshi Kashrishi have an innate ability to increase the light that comes off of their rhino horn. Speaking of their rhino horn, the Zyloshi Kashrishi have adaptations for their neck muscles that make them more capable of using their horns to inflict damage. Beyond the core line and the Lost Omens line, there are a few other books that provide us with some small ancestries. Guns and Gears brought us the Automaton. The Automaton are so ancient that the secrets to their creation have been lost. Within their relic bodies, they hold ancient souls. Hunter automatons are adapted to running on all fours. Mage automatons tap their inner power for a hint of innate magic. Sharpshooter automatons are well suited for taking out targets at range. And warrior automatons come with built-in weaponry. Book of the Dead gave us the skeleton ancestry, one heritage of which is small. Compact skeletons are often made by raising the skeletons of gnomes, goblins, and halflings, and are most valued for their ability to fit into tight spaces. The last ancestry we're going to talk about today actually comes from an adventure path, and it's the only ancestry, to my knowledge, that comes from an adventure path. The Shuni are small, pug-like humanoids, originally created to be companions for the lost god Eridan. Bloodhound Shunis have the strong sense of smell you would often expect. Thick coat Shunis are well adapted to cold environments. Fish seeker Shunis have a strong sense of balance they've honed while fishing on their small rafts. And paddler Shunis have, as you might expect, mastered the doggy paddle. But thank you all for visiting the realm. I have been your humble host, the Goat King, and as always, travel with loyal companions.